Hello everyone, my name is Joseph and we are here at the American Civil War Museum. This Homefront education series is designed just for you so that we can bring you the stories of the Civil War era right to you at home. Now, did you know that 2020 is the 100th year since the 19th Amendment became part of the Constitution? Well, this is the change that stated once and for all that women could not be denied the right to vote. But that fight, and the fight for women to be treated equal to men, started long before 1920, and starts to pick up steam during the Civil War. Come meet one of the leaders in that fight, a woman named Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Elizabeth started all the trouble. Written by Doreen Rappaport, illustrated by Matt Faulkner. Over 235 years ago, Abigail Adams got a letter from her husband. John was in Philadelphia in a big room with lots of other men. The colonists had declared independence from Great Britain and were busy writing new laws for the new nation. Abigail was ecstatic. She wanted independence just as much as John did, but she was worried. Would women be included in the new laws? She warned John that if women were not remembered, they would start their own revolution. John laughed at her. It took much longer than Abigail wanted for that revolution to begin, but it finally started 72 years later. In 1840, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott and their husbands traveled 3,000 miles across the ocean to London. They were meeting people from all over the world who were working as hard as they were to end slavery. When they got to the meeting, Elizabeth and Lucretia found out that they were not allowed to be delegates. In fact, if women wanted to be there just to listen to the men speak, they had to sit behind a curtain so that they wouldn't be seen. Elizabeth and Lucretia were shocked. How could men who were against slavery deny women their rights just because they were women? They had to do something to change this. Well, it took much longer than they would have liked, but on July 13th of 1848, Lucretia and Elizabeth met with three friends to plan a meeting in Seneca Falls. In New York, they went to discuss women's rights. The women knew they needed to write some kind of declaration so people would understand what they wanted. But what should they write? Elizabeth read aloud from Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." The women agreed that it was a great document as far as it went, but Jefferson had left out some very important things. Elizabeth said that she would rewrite it. She did, and she gave it a new name, the Declaration of Sentiments. The women planned a two-day convention to begin 6 days later. They put a notice out about a meeting in the local newspaper. At that time of year in upstate New York, most women were very busy on the farms. The planners didn't think many would come. They were wrong about that. 300 women came from far and near, by horse, by wagon, some even walked. The convention had been planned just for women, but when 40 men showed up on the first day, the women let them in. The women didn't feel confident enough to lead the meeting. In those days, it wasn't considered proper for women to lead meetings if men were present. They asked Lucretia's husband, James, to do it. For 2 days, things went along smoothly as one person after the other made speeches. Elizabeth read and reread her declaration, paragraph by paragraph, and people discussed what she had written. Like the male colonists who had listed their grievances against the King of Great Britain, Elizabeth listed all the unfair laws against women written by men. It was a very long list. It was unfair that women couldn't go to college or become doctors or lawyers or ministers. It was unfair that women could not keep the property that they inherited. It was unfair that women had to give any money they earned to their husbands. Everyone agreed. No one could deny it. Everything Elizabeth said was true. But there was lots of debate over Elizabeth's statement that women deserved the right to vote, and it was their sacred duty to get it. The idea of women voting was too daring for most people at the convention, including many women. But out of 300 people, only 68 women and 32 men signed their names to Elizabeth's declaration. Elizabeth's husband didn't sign. He had left town when she told him what he was planning to do and what she was planning to say. When Elizabeth's father heard what she had said, he rushed up to see if his daughter was insane. That's when the big trouble started. It had taken 72 years, but just like Abigail had predicted, Elizabeth's declaration had started a revolution. Ministers, all men of course, spoke out against her ideas. Women belong at home. Newspaper reporters, all men of course, wrote what they thought about Elizabeth's declaration. Lawmakers, all men of course, laughed. Women certainly do not belong in the voting booth. Elizabeth wasn't surprised that her ideas shocked so many people. Neither was Lucretia. They knew it was going to be a long, hard fight before women won equality, but Elizabeth had no doubt that they would succeed. With so many newspapers all over the country reporting on the Seneca Falls Convention, word spread about Elizabeth's ideas. Lots of women agreed with her. Meetings popped up in towns and cities in the North and Midwest. 1,000 women came for the first National Women's Rights Convention in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1850. Sojourner Truth, who had escaped from slavery, went to a meeting in Ohio. She caused quite a stir when she reminded white women that there were black women treated even worse than they were. In the spring of 1851, a 31-year-old schoolteacher named Susan B. Anthony visited Elizabeth. The two women became fast friends. They traveled everywhere and made lots of speeches together. But after a while, it became too hard for Elizabeth to travel. She had to stay home and bake and cook and wash and sew and care for her children and her husband. Susan B., who was single, went anywhere and everywhere. Other women hit the lecture trail too.
The story isn't over yet, but throughout this first part of our book, Elizabeth, though never alone in her struggle, must have sometimes felt that she was one of the only ones out there feeling the way that she did. But she stood up, pushed through, and demanded change anyway. Along the way, she found out that there were many, many more people who also thought that things were unfair and who were willing to stand with her. Does this sound familiar to you? Have you ever believed that you might be the only person who feels a certain thing, only to talk to someone else and find out that they think that too? Write about that time. Draw a picture of what you believe in, and write about what it felt like to find that someone else felt the same way. If you want to share that moment with us, send it to education@acwm.org. And as always, we'll put our favorites up on our Homefront Education page. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time for part 2. But until then, don't stop believing.